Hello, everybody, and it's great to see you here today for the celebration of International Education Week together with the American Center Moscow and the Regional English Language Office. My name is Jennifer Euler. I'm the director of the Regional English Language Office for Russia, and it's really delightful to talk to you today a little bit about language learning and resources that are available to you to supplement your learning. So I hope we'll have a very good discussion today and that it will motivate you to continue learning, whether you're beginning or you've been studying for many years. As we know, lifelong learning is a pursuit that all of us have who study foreign languages, including the study of English. So let's go ahead and get started. Today, I'm going to share with you some ideas, and I want your ideas too, so we're going to interact about habits for learning, creating good habits for language learning. And so I'm going to ask you some questions. I am hoping for your active participation in the chat box. I welcome any questions or comments that you might have, and I'll be stopping to answer them throughout the presentation. So if you think of something or you want to know something, I want to encourage you to go ahead and write in the chat box. So here's my first question for you, because I am curious like a cat. What are your questions about learning English? My background is as an English language teacher and teacher educator. I don't know everything, but I know a few things about language learning and teaching. And so all of you who are listening today, what do you wish you could ask? What do you wish you knew about learning English? Please go ahead and put your questions in the chat box and I will address them here in a minute. So think about, why am I here today? And what do I want to know? If I could ask Jennifer one or two questions, what would they be about language learning and English language learning? Put them in the box and I'll go ahead and give you an overview of this presentation and come back to them. So I'm looking forward to your questions. They're the best part of these presentations. We can go ahead and move to the next slide. While you're putting in your questions, I thought I would give you an overview of today's presentation. So I wanted to make this presentation for International Education Week as accessible as possible. So I thought we would start with your questions and see what kinds of ideas you have about language learning habits. I'd like to tell you a little bit about my experience in learning languages and teaching languages. I want to give you some research, facts about learning, and some tips for being a good language learner. And finally, I want to share with you many free resources for you to continue your language learning journey or to share with other learners or teachers who might be in your community. I hope that sounds fair. And now I would love to turn to your questions. So we can move to the next slide. And I just want to know, what is it that you want to know? Good. I can see we have a good question here. How long does it take to learn English to finally become fluent? And there's another question there, I think, that is implicit and unasked. What does it mean to be fluent in another language? Good. Are there any other questions? I know I'm often asked about what is the best way to learn a language? What do you think about technology or using phone apps for learning language, maybe even artificial intelligence? What are the best strategies for memorizing new words and using good vocabulary? And I know one of my burning questions as a language learner is, how do I get over that intermediate level where I can kind of manage, but it's not very comfortable, so that I'm a more comfortable language user? And another great question that's been asked, how do I stop being afraid of speaking English or foreign language with foreigners, with other internationals, right? It can be very risky to speak a foreign language. Good. Continue to put your questions in the chat box. I promise I'm going to address them. And those that I don't address, I'm happy to answer at the end of this presentation. Let's get started. I predicted in the next slide one of your questions. I realize this is probably a little bit small to see, but I will share with you all of the links and the research that I've used to create this presentation at the end. There's a QR code, so you can go check it out in your free time and look more closely. How long? How long does it take to learn English? Now, this depends a lot on your starting place. What's your native language? That will make a difference in how long it takes for you to learn English, or any language, actually. So, for example, it might be easier for a Russian speaker to learn Polish than to learn Mandarin or English, for that matter. Kind of depends on what language group it is and how many cognates there are, how similar or different. Experts say that in ideal conditions, so with a good teacher and good materials and focused students, that it takes about my font is really small. It can take up to 750 hours to reach the B2 level, so like intermediate or advanced, right? And to go all the way to C2, which is advanced native like proficiency, it can take up to 1,450 hours in ideal conditions with motivated students, good resources, and good teachers. So that just gives you a sense. Most of us probably spend 1 or 2 hours, maybe 4 hours a week in language learning situations that may not be ideal. We're not motivated, the book's not good, the teacher's okay, or we're just distracted and can't spend that time. So it gives you a sense. Depending on where you are, it will depend on like what your proficiency needs are. So there's the answer to one of your questions. Another question is about proficiency, right? What does it mean to know a language? When do you know you're proficient? And we can move to the next slide. I've put together a little bit of alphabet soup. So maybe you can kind of think to yourself and give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down, at least in your mind, if not in the comment section. Which of these are familiar to you? There are lots of different exams. These are some exams that talk about language proficiency. The TOEFL, the test of English as a foreign language, is from ETS. It's an American exam of English, often used for people who want to study in an academic institution in the United States. So people who are pursuing a bachelor's or a master's or even a doctoral degree. The TOEIC may be less familiar to you. This is generally for workplace situations. So looking at English as an international language that might be needed for jobs, also from the same company, ETS. Maybe you've heard of the IELTS, IELTS. That is an exam from the UK that tests proficiency in a similar way to the TOEFL, but with a different format. There's the CEFR, or the CEFR, depends on where you are, how you say that, the Common European Framework. Maybe you've heard of these terms like, are you an A1 or an A2, a B1, a B2, a C1, a C2? I talked about these a minute ago. They're bands of proficiency that are used internationally to talk about using any language, not just English, but like what level are you in Spanish or in English or in any language, in Russian as well. It's meant to be a way to talk commonly about different levels. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a second. Maybe you've heard about the DET. This is an exam that's become increasingly popular and accessible and is accepted in many different universities in the United States. Duolingo, the app for language learning, also has an English test that determines where you are in your proficiency journey. And finally, there's the Cambridge First Certificate in English, or FCE. Other exams, probably you know some I don't know about as well, that are more localized, but those are international exams you might hear people talk about. What's your score on the TOEFL? What level are you on the CEFR? Have you ever taken the IELTS? Where are you? And it can be really confusing to understand what those different levels are. And so I wanted to start a little bit by looking at the CEFR. I think it's my favorite. It's also being used very widely, including in the United States. So in the next slide, you can find this information on the Common European Framework website. It's translated in English and in Russian, so you can read about it in your native language. Basically, the Common European Framework divides language proficiency into 3 categories: basic, independent, and proficient, and then subcategories. There are lots of can-do statements, so it's built in a positive model. What can you do when you're a basic user? I love this because I think when you're starting to learn a language, you want to feel like you have a sense of accomplishment. I can understand sentences. I can do common activities. I can ask questions in simple forms. If you've never looked at it, I encourage you to do so. Again, there's a Russian language version, so if it's easier for you to skim and scan, you can think about, how many languages do I know? And what can I do in each of them? You probably have different abilities, and your abilities may be different in different skills. Like you may have very good listening and speaking, and your reading and writing skills might be weaker. There is a comparison chart that my home office put together in the next slide. Again, this is kind of technical, but I know some of you are nerdy and you want to know, how do these different tests compare to each other? Again, I will give you the links so that you can read yourself about how these compare, but you can see on the far left, you've got the TOEFL scores that you can get on that assessment. And about midway through, you've got the Common European Framework. And it's kind of interesting to note that there are a lot of C1, C2s, for example, on the TOEFL or the IELTS. And that's because to succeed in an academic environment that's international, you need to have that independent, proficient user level to be able to read research, to write independently, and to have nuanced conversations in the language. I think it's kind of an interesting thing to look at. I like to geek out at this and think about my own language learning history. Okay, so maybe you're like, Jennifer, great. You tell us all this research. Who are you? What kind of experiences do you have? In addition to being a teacher educator and a professional in the field of English language teaching, I'm also a language learner. So these are my foreign languages, and I'm just sharing them with you because I can be honest. I've learned them in very different situations, but I've been a learner of Spanish, of Slovak, of Romanian, of Estonian, of German, of Russian, of Indonesian and Portuguese. I think a lot of the context makes a big difference. Some of these I learned in a classroom. Many of them I learned like living and breathing on the streets where those languages are spoken. Very different experience. My register is different. My confidence is different. My experience is different. And some of them I've learned formally because of personal reasons. Some of them I've learned formally for professional reasons. And I feel like all of them are a journey. If I were to create a picture, I could tell you, like, they're not all equal and they don't maintain their prominence in my brain. I tell you this because I just want you to know, like, I'm not some monolingual English speaker, but someone who's spent a lot of time thinking and a lot of my life learning. So I want to share with you some tips so that you can be a super learner, or at least a better learner of English. So first of all, if we move to the next slide, I want to share with you, I think, a really nice quotation. A professor of mine used it when I was in college, and I like it. Where you stand determines what you see and what you do not see. It determines the angle you see it from. A change in where you stand changes everything. This shifting perspective motivates me to learn languages. Yes, there's artificial intelligence. Yes, you can use Google Translate on your phone. You can even use your phone to take pictures and kind of translate them automatically, but nothing beats looking someone in the eye, sharing a cup of tea, and exchanging stories directly. And the perspectives I gain from learning language are very motivating to me. I hope they're also motivating to you and to your students. So here's some interesting facts. I read on the next slide a New York Times article a few years ago about study habits, and I haven't been able to forget it because one of the things that it talks about is humans. Have you ever noticed that if you're in a classroom or a meeting room or an office space, you want to go sit in the same chair every time next to the same person? It's not a rule. It's just kind of a code. and it's a habit that we form. In this particular article, they talked about how when we do something just a little bit different, it gets our brain's juices moving, reforming synapses, and remembering things more actively. And that is one of the secrets to learning in general, but also language learning. And so I have kept this in mind. And if we look at the next slide, it's something, this is a picture of a park. I love to ride my bicycle. I love to walk. And so this is a park in Brazil that I rode every single day from my house to work. And there's an obvious direction that is like faster and better, more direct. And every once in a while, when I had a wild day or kind of an idea that I needed to work through, I would ride the other direction around the park. And I noticed a pattern. On the days when I rode the wrong direction to work, I had the best ideas. I'd be like, oh, I solved a problem. I have a critical question. I have a creative idea. And to me, it was just proof that by doing things in a different way and incorporating movement, we help our brain to consolidate knowledge about many things. And neuroscience actually backs this up, so it's interesting. So you might think about where you're studying, how you're studying, if you're moving when you're studying, and how that might affect your learning. If we look at the next slide, I just want to mention to you that something about learning. I don't know if you've learned something new recently. These are some things I've learned fairly recently. I include the Argentine tango picture. That is not me. I don't look that good, but I would like to. And I think if you've tried something new, often when we're grown-ups, we don't do this because it makes us feel embarrassed or uncomfortable. When you do something new, maybe if you're like me, it makes you feel a little bit shy or maybe frustrated. The truth is, kind of like sitting in the wrong seat, when we do something new, we're activating our brain to circulate in a new way and to make new connections. And it's very, very powerful. And so learning something new like tango or knitting, or I'm kind of learning how to do a little bit of like artificial intelligence and incorporating it into my professional work. It helps you even in unrelated areas where you're trying to remember and to work your brain. That's why it's so great to be a student for your whole life or a teacher for your whole life, because you have that opportunity to learn and to exercise your brain. So I did my homework for this presentation, and I want to show you a few important pieces of information. So let's first talk in the next slide about memory and practice. So I don't know if you've ever heard this phrase like, repetition is the mother of all learning. I had a Russian teacher who told me that this was how I needed to learn. And it's a very frustrating phrase, right? If you just write a word 100 times, you'll be good. Or if you just repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat, the research does not back this up. So I want to do a little bit of myth busting. If we look at the next slide, the research says, and this is modern research from psychology, from education, and other places. In fact, this book that I'm referencing here is fantastic, called Make It Stick. It's all about memory. Rereading a text, like read your notes, read the book again, and massed practice, which just means repetition of a skill or new knowledge. They are the preferred strategies by all learners, but they're the least productive. That's really interesting, right? So we like to do it, but it doesn't help us. And so a lot of things that we do in school, I think, are around repeat, 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 repeat. Our brains aren't wired that way. In fact, kind of like riding my bicycle the wrong way around the park or sitting in a new chair in the library might help your brain work. There are other ways to plant things more strongly in your memory. Don't worry, I'll tell you exactly what those things are. It's very important, if we move to the next slide, to make information like new vocabulary or new grammar, to make it memorable. So We're built to be lazy. You need to make your memories more memorable. Maximize your laziness. You don't want to review, reread, repeat. You want to bring it up from your mind so that you recall it. You don't want other people to tell you the answers. In fact, in that time in which your brain is struggling to find the answers, you're building new neural networks, which will help you over the long term to have a consistent and long memory about a piece of grammar or vocabulary or chunk. You want to rewrite the past rather than repeat the past. This is from another great book from a polyglot called Fluent Forever. There's a website, lots of good information there if you want to check it out. So, okay, how should you study language if you want to become a highly proficient user? Here's some ideas. Let's go ahead and look at the next slide. So the first idea is you want to use forced retrieval. Don't Google it. Don't look it up in the dictionary. Don't get your teacher to give you the answer right away. We're uncomfortable with this. Sit and struggle to find it. That struggle of basically like your mind looking through all of its information will help you find it later, even if you eventually ask for help. So forcing yourself to find it rather than doing something easy like typing it into your phone is going to help you be a better learner. Actually, I'm going to talk about all these individually. So we'll talk about forced retrieval, spaced practice, interleavening, ownership, and sleep, my favorite thing. So if we move to the next slide, I've already talked about this. This is this idea of forced retrieval, finding the answer, quizzing. My mother was like the hugest fan of this in spelling, because in America, we have to learn how to spell words, even as native speakers. It's very hard. Quizzing yourself using applications to do so without any sort of shortcuts. That reflection, even if you finish learning and you think about what you've learned, is much more effective practice. And the research says that it will help you remember things longer and better. So that's the first tip. The second tip is not new, but it's sometimes the best things are old things that we reuse. If we look at the next slide, it's spaced practice. So this is the idea that we recycle our learning. There are a couple of systems for language learning. If you've ever heard of the Lightner box, it's with cards, so very old-fashioned, where you have a rotation system for vocabulary that you learn or grammar that you learn, and then it is recycled when you incorrectly or correctly answer it. I learned this when I was learning a language a long time ago with a complicated system of cards that I had to quiz myself every day. There's great technology that does this automatically. Anki, which is an open source tool, allows you to make your own cards, and then it automatically rewards you with words that you've correctly answered several times by putting those kind of like in the background. And then it brings them up much later to help consolidate your practice. So spacing practice and not just learning a set of vocabulary and then forgetting about it forever is a very important part of helping your brain build good learning habits. The next thing I want to talk about is interleavening. Maybe some of you are also ballroom dancers like I am. If you remember learning ballroom dancing, if you didn't learn it as a small child, it's a little frustrating because you learn a little bit of the tango, then you stop and you do the waltz, and then you stop and you move to the cha-cha, and then you move to the quick step, and you feel like, I don't have any of these correctly. So how can we move on? I just want to learn everything in order, one thing at a time. Language learners feel this way too. Like, I just want to start at the beginning of English and learn everything. And that's not how learning works. It's very important to kind of interleave in practice like they do in dance classes. You want to mix before you're completely finished. Go do something else and then come back to it. Why? It helps our brain build pathways and remember it for longer. So you can mix your modalities. Okay, I'm going to listen, and then I'm going to write, and then I'm going to go back to listening. I'm going to do vocabulary, and then I'm going to move over to looking at my pronunciation. Then I'll come back and, I don't know, listen to a podcast. Those are really good learning habits so that you're not doing the same thing all the time, like practicing your Duolingo or something. It's important as well to build ownership. So this book I shared with you earlier from called Fluent Forever talks about making personal connections. So this is examples of how you could make flashcards, right? You could have the word in English with a translation. It's okay, one-to-one correspondence. You can have a symbol. That's like a little bit better because it's building like a visual representation, not just a translation. You could have a picture. A picture is even a little bit better, right? Like, okay, I can visualize a wedding. A wedding is like this. What is much, much better is to make a connection with your life. So here's a picture from my wedding with my handsome husband. And chances are, if I learn the word wedding or phrase to get married, together with a picture that is from my life or with names and examples from my life, I will never forget it. So when you're considering making flashcards or even writing sentences for class, the more that you can use examples that are in your life, the name of your dog, a situation you've been in, your town, the better chances you have of remembering it. Finally, my final tip number 5, is about sleeping. You can't learn everything in one day. Consolidation requires sleep. It's actually very, very, very important for our brain. There are limits. So make sure that you're taking a break to go for a walk, to take a nap, to consolidate and then come back to it. It's also part of this like interleavening. All right. I want to look at a couple of questions. Wait, I'm going to leave them for the end, but I love the questions that are coming in. So if you have more, please write them. Before I turn to questions, I promised I would give you some free resources, and so here they are. The Regional English Language Office has a lot of free resources. Free resources are the best for learning English. I've listed them here, and I will give you all the links at the end of this presentation. These are a preview of a few that I'm going to talk about, and I will move through them, and then we can answer questions. So we can go ahead and move to the next slide. AmericanEnglish.state.gov is a website for teachers and learners of English. There's tons of free stuff there, including books for learning languages that are adapted to a lower level. There are games, there are songs you can listen to, and for teachers, there's a lot of resources there that you can download, a monster book for teaching and lots of other things. So if you've never been to AmericanEnglish.state.gov, I encourage you to take a look. The second resource I want to mention to you is a YouTube channel, American English at State. So it's the same website, and I'll give you all the links at the end. It has lots of short videos, generally 2-3 minutes long, that focus on a specific phrasal verb, grammatical item. It can also be vocabulary. They're super easy to watch. There are new ones being added all the time. You can watch them more than once. You can slow them down. You can speed them up. And there are playlists that also include things for teachers, so webinars and things like that. All right. Let's skip the next 2 slides and go to the slides that say enroll in a free MOOC. So the Regional English Language Office also has courses that are free and open. They're actually called open courses, but they're open too. So it's the Online Professional English Network. We have many courses that are open right now for learners, including courses at the intermediate level that combine English language learning with a topic like journalism, business and entrepreneurship, science, technology, engineering, and math, media literacy. And then we also have massive open online courses for teachers. There are 2 that are open right now. You can see them here. They're open courses. I can highly recommend the one on fostering student engagement and motivation. They're free. You can sign up. There are 5 modules in each MOOC, and you can choose to take them in 5 weeks, do 1 module per week. They're self-paced, and you can also do 5 modules in 5 days if you're super crazy about being on the MOOCs. But they're always there, and you can find them at openenglishprograms.state.gov. Another great resource for you is one that's specific for Russian speakers called Молодец. Молодец is a project with the Regional English Language Office and the International Women's Resource Center. And it is created to integrate culture and language learning for students at remember the Common European Framework at the A2, B1 level, so kind of pre-intermediate, intermediate. And it's for students. You can just go there, study. There are exercises. There's TikTok videos. There's a YouTube channel, podcasts, and so on. Teachers can also use it. If we look at the next slide, you can see just an example here of a certain module. So this module is focused on aspects of everyday life. So you can see there, you've got different, school in the house and a particular grammatical focus. So present tense, work, money and technology. I think the real strength of these units is there's a lot of free material, but I love personally, if we look at the next slide, part of Молодец also includes these short TikTok videos that are also on YouTube that are about life in the United States. Anything from like vegan tacos to how Americans like ice in their drinks or other cultural nuances. So you can watch those independently, or you can go to the website at молодецell.com. There are a lot of resources out there. And so I just want to say to you, including here at the American Center in Moscow, they have so many rich opportunities to practice your English, whether it's in a debate or poetry club and so on. I'm sharing this quote before I answer questions from Amanda Gorman, who's a fantastic young American poet and was our poet laureate recently. All of us bring light to exciting solutions never tried before, for it is our hope that implores us at our uncompromising core to keep rising up for an earth more than worth fighting for. And I think this speaks to my motivation for learning languages, which is being able to connect with people and to find hope and possibilities together. In the last slide, I have a QR code. Everything is there. So the pieces about language proficiency and tests, as well as the resources I've mentioned, you're welcome to get in touch with me. The Regional English Language Office can be reached at RELO Russia at state.gov. The U.S. Embassy has tons of exchange programs that are open for you. So I encourage you to explore everything that is there on the U.S. Embassy webpage. And finally, we also have a WhatsApp channel, other places you can connect with us and find out about opportunities. So I would love to be in touch with you and to help you find ideas or to hear your feedback on things that you like or maybe don't like so much in the resources that I've shared today. Thank you for your attention. I would love to attend to a couple of your questions. So give me just a second to scroll and respond. Let's see. All right, I've got to scroll up. Here we go. Well, I'll just read your questions and answer them. Someone asked, how do you get rid of a Russian accent? My question would be, why do you want to get rid of a Russian accent? Accents are so beautiful, and all English speakers have accents. I have an accent too. I think that the most important thing is making sure that you are comprehensible, that people understand you. If you're an adult learner of a language, you will probably always have some sort of accent. You can work on making it sound better. I suggest when you're watching or listening to items that are short, stopping them, repeating, listening, and shadowing. I think you can also do some good work even with tools. There are better AI tools now, but very simple tools like Google Translate. For example, when I'm practicing Russian and I want to see if I'm comprehensible, I will use the microphone setting, and instead of typing in the word that I think I'm saying, I speak it in, and it's very interesting. What it recognizes and doesn't recognize. I think the speech recognition software is even stronger for English, but that's a great way to test. The other thing I would say, the more practice you get, the more you're listening to and using English, the less marked your accent is going to be over time. And then, of course, if you're a crazy pronunciation freak, there are lots of very specific training you can do. But I think most learners want to aim for being understood. All right. How to stop being afraid of speaking with foreigners? Yeah, this is a great question. I think it's just practice. Most people are so much kinder than you realize. And at least with English speakers, I think very few of them notice your mistakes as much as you do. So you may find that an international audience is a lot more forgiving than your English teacher or even your friend who's in your English class. Generally, people just genuinely want to communicate with you. So I think, again, like experience will help you. I've also found that sometimes when I practice out loud, even when I don't have someone to talk to or I read out loud, it makes me feel like my tongue and my muscles are more attuned to speaking a foreign language, and then I'm less shy about it. All right. Good. Another question. Certain steps, how to become fluent in English, daily steps. Yeah, I hope I didn't address this so directly, but I think if you want to become a more fluent speaker, it's got to be a habit. Can't be a hobby. It needs to be a habit. The difference between a hobby and a hobby is something you can do for a while and then leave. Or when you don't have enough time, you don't have your hobby. But a habit needs to be more like eating breakfast. You eat breakfast every day or have coffee every day. If you can build something into the rhythm of your life so that every day you have a moment when you're learning or using English, you'll stop thinking about it. For example, when I was learning Portuguese, one of the habits that I built was that every morning when I was drinking my coffee, I read the newspaper in Portuguese, not in English. So I saved my English news reading for like later in the day. And it was very powerful for me. I think also if you have a habit that already exists in your life, like you go to the gym or you walk every day or you commute on the bus in the afternoon, a habit that you can build in is listening to a podcast or studying your vocabulary or grammar cards, whether they're on your phone or on a physical piece of paper, that you're just building in like a thing you do. Like, oh, when I sit and wait for the bus, I practice English. And I think that's the big thing. When we make our language learning a hobby and not a habit, I think that's when you lose it. And I know languages that I'm not actively practicing, I lose them. So I tend to have like a singular focus on the language that I'm practicing right now. Okay. How can I enhance my students' speaking skills with the help of AI? I think that's a whole nother presentation, actually. There's a lot out there right now on artificial intelligence and how you can have students work with it. I think if you're interested in exploring that topic, we could probably arrange for a separate seminar, and I would love to do that with you. So shoot me an email at relorussia@state.gov or contact the American Center Moscow and make that suggestion. I think that's something we can make happen. All right. Oh, good. These are great questions. If I'm learning several foreign languages, will I learn English faster or not? So you remember what I was saying about kind of like your brain's juices, and the more that you exercise them, the better. There is research that says like connections between languages are stronger when you have done more of them. I think this is true, but it doesn't mean that it's not work. So one thing that adults, I think, forget, particularly those that learned a foreign language when they were a young kid, like my Spanish, I learned in school. I went to class. I did the exercises. I listened to my teacher. I was a good student, but I didn't try to learn it like in a year or 2 years or anything crazy. It was over a longer period of time with lots of repetition. Language learning is always work. So I think you can You can increase your ability to learn languages because you'll have better habits and experiences and you'll know what your learning styles are, but it's still going to be work. So I would say you shouldn't expect that if, I don't know, you speak 7 languages, that the 8th one is going to be like a snap, but you'll have better strategies for getting through it. And so, some people say, or it's very popular opinion, right, that only children can learn languages. It's false. It's been proved over and over again. The difference between children and adults is a lot of our ego and risk taking, but adults have schemata that we can use to build grammar on to help our understanding of cognates or how languages work. So we do have some superpowers, even when we're older, to learn a language and to learn it very, very successfully. All right. Let's see another question. How can students be motivated to learn English at an early age? The importance of learning a foreign language, better and more effective to start learning the language when you understand why you need to learn it. This is like a perennial question. That massive open online course through the Online Professional English Network I mentioned earlier has a lot of insights to that. And there's active research around motivation and language learning. It's not my area of specialization, but I think it's a little bit of all those things, kind of like I was talking about learning a language in school versus learning a language as an adult. It does help when you're purposeful about it, but there are a lot of things you're learning in school that you don't overthink, right? We all studied geometry. I probably could not find the area of a triangle to save my life because I haven't done it since I was in the 7th grade. However, it doesn't mean I couldn't learn how to do it again. I think maybe a little bit of both, and it's a big topic of research, so one where you can find a lot of good information. How do you manage your time so that you seem to do so many things effectively? Well, I personally don't know if I manage my time effectively. I think busy people find time to do more things somehow. And so being a little bit structured and purposeful, I think knowing what your goals are and where you're heading is important. I can give this example. I started learning Russian in 2011 for my job. I liked it. It's my second Slavic language, so I have this interesting dissonance with another Slavic language that I find kind of cool. And I wouldn't say I'm good at it, but I like it, and I'm a little bit unafraid to make mistakes. I dedicate 6 hours a week to coursework that I do. In addition to that, I don't do a lot of homework. I'm not a good student in that way, but I probably do about 2 hours of homework outside of class. So that's a habit. It's something I put on my calendar. I do it during my prime parts of my day. I'm a good morning person. So I think in terms of language learning, or you have to decide what matters to you most and put those things in first and then not move them around. So I put my language learning in the calendar. Maybe I'm not so good at putting in my time at the gym to exercise, but these other parts of my life are very solidly in my calendar and I don't move them because they're important to me. All right, good. Oh, this is great. Someone was here last year too. So hi, great to see you again. What new things have I learned this year? That's such a personal question, a good one. I feel like I need more time to think. What was the most astounding discovery for you as an educator this year? Oof. I think I'm not very unique in being very interested in artificial intelligence and how that's affecting our daily life. I'm not an expert, but I have played around with it, and I'm really interested to think about how that can make the learning and the teaching process better, easier, or what kinds of assistance we might have. So I wouldn't say I've learned it, but that's something that I'm really exploring. And then astonishing discovery. We do so many projects with Russian educators. I'm just surprised at how dedicated English teachers are to the profession and how open people are to educational exchanges. And so we have a lot of fantastic exchanges with Americans and Russians interacting. And I think despite geopolitics or kind of like what's in the news, there's such positivity around discovering the other. And I delight in that. We did a event earlier this week where people were talking about Russian rock and roll, and the Americans were kind of comparing with different, types of rock and roll back in the US. And it's really fascinating how many points of connection that we can find. And I'm delighted by that and astonished by it over and over again. All right. Anki. Okay, this is a good question. This is a great question about language learning. Is it more effective to learn individual words or whole phrases? And should examples with the blanks for the words being studied be on the flashcard? There's debate on this. The books I mentioned, Make It Stick and Fluent Forever, talk a lot about making it personal. So if you write, making it personal and contextual. When I make a flashcard, this is just like the Jennifer Euler strategy. I often will use a gloss. So I will have the word, sometimes a picture, but often just the word in a foreign language plus my native language for quick retrieval. And then I include a sample sentence. Sometimes I will just use the sample sentence. So for example, if you're trying to master a phrasal verb or a whole chunk of language or even a piece of grammar, I like to learn a whole sentence and kind of test or quiz myself with that. I find it to be very effective because I can do almost like a substitution drill if I know exactly how the phrase works with like a reflexive verb or some crazy collocation that I normally wouldn't use. And then I'll get it right every time because I can remember that anchor that I've placed for myself. So I think you're often better off if you embed your vocabulary in a full phrase or sentence and something that you would really use or say. So not something crazy that you would never say or talk about. Otherwise, and why are you learning it? You may not use it in your native language very often. All right, there's a stereotype. New question. About the Russian accent being very strong and noticeable to foreigners. As a result, many Russian-speaking students place a great emphasis on eliminating accent. I could see that. And often, depending on your context, accents can be glamorized or weaponized to some extent. I would say, Americans, we love accents. And so it doesn't matter. It matters a little bit on where you are and how you've been exposed to it. But we find accents very glamorous. So whether it's a French accent or a Russian accent or a British accent, we find these things very like intriguing and mysterious and sexy. So kind of probably depends on where you are. I think there's no great stigma attached. And often it's a little bit hard for me to figure out until I've listened to someone for a long time. Certainly you don't want to mark yourself so that people can't listen to you. And a lot of that will depend on the context in which you're using English. My favorite place to listen to English is on the airplane or in the airport, because it's often a non-native speaker speaking to another non-native speaker, and to kind of guess where are they from, do they understand each other, and listen to them negotiate meeting. It's often not in the places that I would identify as a native speaker. All right, let's see. Last question. Let's see. Of all the languages you've learned, which one did you find to be the most difficult, and which one did you find the most interesting to learn? So I loved learning Portuguese. It's a pretty recent language acquisition for me. I think I liked it because it was built on Spanish and because the nasalization of Portuguese words is kind of pretty to me. And I could make really rapid progress because I understood a lot of the language because of how close it is to Spanish early, and I could participate early. I wish I had had more time in Brazil to be using my Portuguese, and I hope someday to return to it. Most difficult. Maybe I really enjoyed it, so it's kind of hard to say. It was difficult, but like I really liked learning it. When I was in my 20s, I moved to rural Slovakia. I lived in a village of 4,000 people. Slovak is my other Slavic language, and I have Czech heritage, so it's kind of like cool for me. The thing about it that was difficult was that I had never studied a language that had so much declination, and I didn't know it existed. So it was kind of like, what do you mean? Dative, accusative, genitive. Like, this is crazy, because we don't have it in English. I mean, I had a degree in English and linguistics, but you don't talk about your native language in exactly the same way. So I liked that challenge, and I think it helped me a lot when I started learning Russian and German and understanding the case systems. So it was challenging, but I also I really liked it. It was fun. It was cool, and it connected to my identity. So I found it to be meaningful. All right, and all right. First year students, the Susie program, the Summer Institute in the US. I am not the program manager for Susie. I'm a huge fan of the program. It's for university students, teachers, and scholars. You should read the program announcement, and I would encourage you to write to the email that's indicated on the program announcement. If you can't find the email, you can email relorussia@state.gov, and I'll find you the answer, but I don't know. So thank you for asking. And then finally, there's a question about events for teachers. Oh, there's a couple more questions. Okay. Upcoming events for teachers. I could talk for 5 hours on upcoming events for teachers because there are so many. The Regional English Language Office has a WhatsApp channel. I linked it in that list of resources I sent you earlier, and maybe someone from the AMC could send out the link here. We put program announcements there. Right now, we have an exchange open for English teachers next year called LX. And there'll be a group of teachers selected to go to the US for 2 weeks in March to attend the International Teachers of English to Speakers of Other Language, or TESOL, convention in Tampa, Florida. And then we'll send a group of teachers also to Denver, Colorado for the Educational Technology conference called ISTE in June. The application closes the end of the month. So if you're interested, you can write to me at RELO Russia and I will respond and send you the program announcement. But you can also find it on our WhatsApp channel. We also are actively recruiting for a program called Svetnik, which is growing a future generation of teachers. This is a virtual exchange that will include Russian educators, a number of workshops happening mostly next year on cool topics where you'll get all the materials so you can replicate them in your own environments, and then instructional coaching with an American TESOL professional. And that is also open until the end of the month. We have upcoming online courses for next year. We'll have another exchange with the University of Maryland, the Foreign Language Teaching Center that's not quite ready yet. And there's a lot more. So if you're curious about that, feel free to get in touch. I can put you on the distribution list for our newsletter and also send you our WhatsApp channel so you can find announcements there. I know that the American Center Moscow cross-posts opportunities, so you can find them there as well. There is a current program, I think you probably might know, the song program with Selena. There's instructional coaching with Brandon, and I'm forgetting our third. Oh, and Damietska, who does advanced English, will be consolidating plans for 2024 and getting the word out to you so you know what's going on. There'll be a new series with American English Live, too, that will be starting in January. So just watch this space for more information, and I know they'll send it to you. And one last question from the American Center Moscow team. What advice would you give to all educators in Russia who teach English? So, teachers of English, I'm talking to you. You are such an inspiration, and you have a superpower, which is the ability to bring people from the margins to the center to have important conversations. I became an English teacher by accident, but it is the best accident that I have ever had because I think that there's so much space for creativity, incorporating important ideas about the world, and helping to mature your students to be good learners generally and good people in life. And even better than that, connecting our world. So a lot of the great challenges that face humanity today, whether we're talking about issues with ecology or issues with human understanding, one of the ways that we help learn is to connect with each other. And languages are one of those ways that we can do it. So I know it said that teachers are the future of, or teachers plant all future professions. I think it's really true. You are the ones who connect our world, and you connect it in a way that is hopeful and optimistic and peaceful. And so I guess my message to you would be, keep doing what you're doing. It is so important. It's never been more vital for our planet to be learning languages. In the period of artificial intelligence and technology, human connection becomes all the more valuable. And so I thank you for being teachers of English, and especially in International Education Week. I want to value the work you do, and thank you for helping your learners become better at what they do. I hope you'll connect with the American Center Moscow and with the Regional English Language Office, take advantage of communities, and get what you need to become even better professionals. It's one of the best jobs that I can think of, and I'm really grateful to the community of Russian English language teachers for all the work you do. So thank you, and thank you for joining today. I hope that you took some good pieces of this talk, and I look forward to connecting to you in the future. I should remind you that on Friday evening, there'll be a talk by Jennifer Idem, who's one of our English language specialists, and she'll be talking of the future of methods for the classroom and a lot about resilient schools and resilient teaching. She's a great presenter, so I hope you'll join us again then, and again this year and next year for other opportunities. So thank you very much, and have a great evening.